Jasmine couldn't stop smiling as she walked down the busy city street. The evening air felt different somehow, fresher, full of possibility. After 2 years of putting in extra hours, taking on the projects nobody else wanted, and proving herself over and over again, she'd finally gotten the promotion she deserved at Wilson and Brooks Marketing. Senior Account Manager. The words still gave her goosebumps. She checked her reflection in a store window as she passed. The navy blue dress had cost nearly a full paycheck 3 months ago, but tonight was worth it. She'd been saving it for a special occasion, and finally getting recognized at work definitely counted. La Cille restaurant stood like a glittering jewel at the corner, its warm lights spilling onto the sidewalk. Jasmine had walked past it dozens of times, always peeking in at the crystal chandeliers and elegant diners, wondering what it would be like to be there. Tonight she would find out. Her phone buzzed with a text from her dad. "So proud of you, honey. Enjoy your celebration. You earned it." Jasmine smiled and tucked her phone away. Her father had taught her the value of hard work and dignity when facing obstacles. As the only black woman in her department, she'd faced plenty of those. "Good evening, miss. Do you have a reservation?" the host asked as she entered the restaurant. His tone was polite, but his eyes seemed to scan her skeptically. "Yes, Taylor for one, please," Jasmine replied confidently, though her heart was beating faster. She'd made the reservation days ago, excited to treat herself. The host checked his list, looking somewhat surprised. Yes. Right this way, Miss Taylor." Jasmine followed him through the restaurant, feeling the weight of curious glances from other diners. The restaurant was even more beautiful inside. Soft jazz played, conversations hummed at a respectful volume, and the smell of amazing food filled the air. "Here you are," the host said, pulling out a chair at a table by the large window overlooking the city lights. "Your sipper will be with you shortly." "Thank you," Jasmine said, smoothing her dress as she sat down. The view was breathtaking. The city spread out before her like a sea of twinkling stars. From this height, the traffic looked like streams of red and white ribbons flowing between buildings. A server approached with a genuine smile. "Good evening. My name is Thomas, and I'll be taking care of you tonight. May I start you with something to drink?" "Yes, I'd like a glass of the house champagne, please," Jasmine replied. If ever there was a night for bubbles, this was it. "Excellent choice," Thomas said, placing a menu before her. "Tonight's specials are listed on the insert. I'll be right back with your champagne." As Jasmine looked at the menu, she couldn't help but notice several dishes with price tags that would have made her nervous just a year ago. But tonight was different. Tonight was about celebrating how far she'd come. Growing up, her dad had worked constantly to provide for her and her brother after their mom passed away. He'd built his company from nothing, teaching Jasmine that success wasn't about where you started, but how determined you were to reach your goals. Thomas returned with a sparkling glass of champagne. "Here you are. Are you celebrating something special tonight?" Jasmine nodded. "Yes, I got promoted today." "Congratulations, that's wonderful news," Thomas said with genuine warmth. "Take your time with the menu. I'll check back in a few minutes." As she sipped her champagne, Jasmine gazed out at the city lights, feeling a sense of accomplishment wash over her. She'd fought for this moment. All the time she'd been talked over in meetings, the clients who'd asked to work with someone else, when meeting her, the constant need to prove herself. Tonight, she was exactly where she belonged. The champagne bubbles tickled her nose as she took another sip, already planning which delicious dish to order. This moment was perfect. Until she noticed a well-dressed older woman enter the restaurant with 2 friends, throwing a disapproving glance her way. Jasmine took another sip of her champagne, unaware that her perfect evening was about to take an unexpected turn. Jasmine took another sip of her champagne, trying to focus on the menu instead of the woman who had just walked in, but she could feel eyes on her. The woman, dressed in an expensive-looking cream pantsuit with gold jewelry that caught the light, was whispering to the host while glancing in Jasmine's direction. "Is everything to your liking?" Thomas asked, returning to Jasmine's table. "Yes, everything's wonderful," Jasmine replied with a smile. "I think I'll have the seared scallops to start." "Excellent choice," Thomas said, writing down her order. "And for your main course?" Before Jasmine could answer, she noticed the host leading the woman and her 2 friends to a table across the room. The woman's face tightened as she said something that made the host look uncomfortable. He responded with an apologetic gesture toward the dining room, which was clearly packed for the evening. "I'll try the filet mignon, medium rare," Jasmine said, redirecting her attention to Thomas. "Perfect. I'll put your order in right away," Thomas said before walking away. Jasmine pulled out her phone to text her best friend about the promotion when she felt someone standing beside her table. Looking up, she found herself face to face with the woman in the cream pantsuit. "Excuse me," the woman said, her voice honey-sweet but her eyes cold. "I believe there's been some confusion." Jasmine put her phone down. "I'm sorry." "This table," the woman said, gesturing to where Jasmine sat. "It seems there's been a mix-up. This is actually my regular table. I'm Catherine Sinclair." She said her name as if Jasmine should recognize it. Jasmine blinked, unsure how to respond. "I'm sorry, but the host seated me here." Catherine's smile remained fixed, but her eyes narrowed slightly. Yes, that was clearly an oversight. "You see, I dine here every Thursday evening with my friends, and we always sit at this table. It has the best view in the house." Jasmine glanced around, noticing several diners at nearby tables watching the interaction. Her cheeks grew warm with embarrassment, but she kept her voice steady. "I understand, but I was seated here, and I've already ordered." Catherine leaned in closer, lowering her voice. "Look, I don't think you understand. I'm a very good friend of the owner. My husband's company hosts their corporate events here. I'm sure you'd be more comfortable elsewhere." The implication hung in the air between them. Jasmine felt her stomach tighten as she realized what was happening. She'd faced this kind of treatment before, the subtle suggestions that she didn't belong in certain spaces. "I'm quite comfortable right here, thank you," Jasmine replied calmly, though her heart was racing. Catherine's smile faded completely. "Let me be more direct. This is an upscale establishment with certain standards. Perhaps you wandered in by mistake. The Olive Garden is just down the street." A few gasps came from nearby tables. Jasmine felt her ears burning, but years of dealing with microaggressions in the workplace had prepared her for moments like this. She sat up straighter, meeting Catherine's gaze. "I didn't wander in anywhere. I made a reservation, just like everyone else here. I was seated by the staff, and I'm celebrating my promotion tonight. I have every right to be here." Catherine's face flushed. "Do you have any idea who I am? My husband plays golf with the owner every Sunday. I've been coming here for years." "I don't care if your husband plays golf with the Pope," Jasmine replied, keeping her voice level. "That doesn't give you the right to ask me to move." By now, most of the nearby diners were watching the scene unfold. Thomas, Jasmine's server, noticed the commotion and approached with concern on his face. "Is everything all right here?" he asked, looking between the two women. Catherine turned to him. "No, everything is not all right. I'd always sit at this table on Thursdays. Everyone here knows that." "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but we're fully booked tonight, and tables are assigned based on reservations," Thomas explained. Catherine pulled out her phone. "This is ridiculous. I'm going to record this and make sure everyone knows how this place treats its loyal customers." She pointed her phone at Jasmine. "You clearly don't belong here. What's your name? Where do you work?" Jasmine felt her hands trembling beneath the table, but she kept her expression calm. She'd worked too hard to let someone like Catherine ruin her special night. "My name is Jasmine Taylor," she said clearly, "and where I work is none of your business." Catherine's phone camera remained pointed at Jasmine's face, the red recording light blinking steadily. The restaurant had grown quiet enough that the soft jazz music in the background seemed suddenly loud. "Jasmine Taylor," Catherine repeated, the corner of her mouth turning up. "Well, Miss Taylor, I'm going to make sure the owner sees how you've behaved tonight." "How I've behaved?" Jasmine kept her voice steady despite her racing heart. "I was enjoying a quiet dinner until you came over demanding my table." A middle-aged man in a suit at the next table cleared his throat. "Ma'am," he said to Catherine, "maybe you should leave that young lady alone. She was here first." Catherine spun around. "Mind your own business," she snapped before turning back to Jasmine. "This isn't about the table anymore, it's about respect. Do you know how much money I spend here every month? I could buy and sell this place if I wanted to." The restaurant manager, a thin man with salt and pepper hair and wire-rimmed glasses, hurried over. "What seems to be the problem here?" he asked, looking nervously between the two women. "Mr. Phillips, thank goodness," Catherine said, lowering her phone slightly. "This girl is sitting at my regular table and refuses to move." Mr. Phillips glanced at Jasmine, then back at Catherine. "Miss Sinclair, I understand your frustration, but as we explained when you arrived, we'd fully booked tonight. We simply don't have another window table available." "Then move someone else," Catherine insisted. "My husband's company brings in half your business. Surely you can find another table for—" She waved her hand dismissively at Jasmine, "whoever this is." Mr. Phillips looked torn. Jasmine could see the calculation happening behind his eyes. Was Catherine's business worth more than doing the right thing? "I'm sorry, Miss Sinclair, but I can't ask another guest to move," he said finally, though his voice lacked conviction. Catherine's face hardened. "Really? Because I think you can. And if you won't, I'll call Wilson right now." She pulled out another phone, apparently she carried two, and began scrolling through contacts. "I'm sure he'd be interested to know how you're treating your VIP customers." The manager's face paled. "Perhaps we could offer you a complimentary bottle of champagne at your current table. The Dom Perignon you enjoy." Jasmine watched this exchange with growing disbelief. She took a deep breath, her father's words echoing in her mind. "Never let anyone make you feel small. You have every right to take up space in this world." "Excuse me," Jasmine said, her voice cutting through the tension. "I don't mean to be rude, but I made a reservation. I was seated here. I've ordered my food. I'm celebrating a special occasion. I'm not moving." Catherine turned back to her, phone still recording. "Listen, honey, you clearly don't understand how the world works. Places like this have unwritten rules. Special tables go to special people." "Special people?" Jasmine repeated. "And what makes you special and me not?" Catherine gave her a cold smile. "Look around you. Do you see many people who look like you dining here? There's a reason for that." Gasps came from several nearby tables. Even Catherine's friends looked uncomfortable, one of them whispering, "Kathy, that's enough." Jasmine felt a surge of heat rise from her chest to her face. She had worked too hard, come too far to be spoken to this way. She thought of all the times she'd been the only black person in the room during business meetings, all the times she had to work twice as hard to be taken half as seriously. "The reason," Jasmine said clearly, "is because of people like you who think they own spaces that are meant for everyone." Catherine's eyes widened in shock, as if she couldn't believe Jasmine had stood up to her. "How dare you speak to me that way? Do you know who my husband is?" "No, and I don't care," Jasmine replied. "But I know who I am. I'm someone who deserves to be here just as much as you do." Mr. Phillips looked increasingly anxious. "Please, ladies, let's keep our voices down." "I will not be quiet," Catherine said, her voice rising. "This is outrageous. I want to speak to the owner right now." As she continued her tirade, Thomas approached with Jasmine's scallop appetizer, looking uncertain about whether to set it down amid the confrontation. Behind him, the restaurant doors opened, and a tall, distinguished-looking man in an expensive suit walked in. Jasmine caught sight of him over Catherine's shoulder, and for the first time since the confrontation began, she smiled. The tall man who had just entered Le Ciel paused at the entrance, surveying the room with calm, observant eyes. He was impeccably dressed in a tailored charcoal suit that spoke of quiet wealth, not flashy, but unmistakably expensive. His salt and pepper hair was neatly trimmed, and despite being in his mid-50s, he carried himself with the vitality of someone much younger. Catherine, still waving her phone in Jasmine's face, hadn't noticed him yet. "I spend more on wine here in a month than you probably make in a year," she continued, her voice getting louder. "People like me keep places like this in business. People like you just take up space." Several diners were now openly staring at the scene, some with disapproval directed at Catherine, others awkwardly pretending not to notice. One woman at a nearby table whispered to her companion, someone should do something. Thomas, Jasmine's server, stood frozen with the plate of scallops, clearly unsure whether to serve the food or retreat to the kitchen. Mr. Phillips, the manager, kept glancing nervously toward the entrance, his eyes widening as he recognized the man who had just arrived. Jasmine took a deep breath. "People like me." she repeated, her voice calm but firm. What exactly do you mean by that, Ms. Sinclair? Catherine's cheeks flushed deeper. You know exactly what I mean. This isn't some neighborhood diner. This is La Cille. The waiting list for reservations is months long. Yet somehow I managed to get one, Jasmine replied, looking Catherine directly in the eyes. Maybe because I called ahead and made a reservation like everyone else, instead of assuming I owned the place. A few chuckles came from nearby tables, and Catherine's face tightened with anger. One of her friends stood up from their table and approached, tugging gently at Catherine's sleeve. Kathy, please, let's just enjoy our dinner, the friend said quietly. This is getting out of hand. Catherine shook her off. No, Lisa, this is about principle. She turned back to Jasmine. You obviously don't understand how these things work. There's a social order to places like this. His social order? Jasmine raised an eyebrow. Based on what? The color of my skin? The size of my bank account? Catherine's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. That's not what I said. Don't put words in my mouth. I'm recording all of this, remember? She shook her phone for emphasis. Oh, I remember, Jasmine said. And I hope you post that video. I'd love for everyone to see how you've treated me tonight. Mr. Phillips stepped forward again, desperation in his voice. Miss Sinclair, please. We value your patronage, but I must ask you to return to your table. We're disturbing the other guests. I'm not going anywhere until she moves, Catherine insisted, pointing at Jasmine. Call Wilson. Call the owner. I'll wait. The man at the entrance began walking toward them, his footsteps quiet on the plush carpet. A few diners recognized him, their expressions changing to surprise as he passed their tables. One businessman nearly choked on his wine. I think you've said quite enough, Jasmine told Catherine, her voice steady despite the hurt and anger she felt inside. I came here to celebrate a major accomplishment in my career, not to be harassed about whether I belong. Catherine laughed, a harsh sound that cut through the restaurant's elegant atmosphere. Accomplishment? What could you possibly have accomplished that warrants dining at La Cille? Thomas, still holding the plate of scallops, found his voice. Ma'am, I really need to serve this food while it's hot. Go ahead, Jasmine said to him with a small smile. I'm still planning to enjoy my dinner. Catherine reached out and grabbed Thomas's wrist, stopping him from placing the plate on the table. Don't you dare serve her while this is unresolved. Take your hand off my server, came a deep, commanding voice from behind Catherine. Everyone turned to see the distinguished man now standing just feet away. His presence seemed to fill the space around them, calm but undeniably powerful. Catherine's eyes widened with recognition. Mr. Taylor, she said, her voice suddenly honey-sweet again. What a surprise to see you here. The man didn't return her smile. Instead, he looked at Jasmine with warm eyes. Sorry I'm late, sweetheart. Traffic was terrible. Is this woman bothering you? Catherine's face went from flushed red to ghostly pale in an instant. Her phone, still recording, slowly lowered as she looked back and forth between Jasmine and the man she had called Mr. Taylor. Catherine's phone slipped from her fingers and clattered onto the table, still recording. The restaurant had gone completely silent. Even the background music seemed to have paused at the perfect dramatic moment. You're Robert Taylor, Catherine stammered, her voice barely above a whisper. Of Taylor Innovations. I am, he replied simply, his eyes never leaving Catherine's face. And you are? Catherine Sinclair, she said, automatically extending her hand before quickly withdrawing it when he made no move to shake it. Robert Taylor turned to his daughter. Jasmine, is everything okay? I got your text about celebrating your promotion, but it looks like I've walked into something. Jasmine gave her father a small smile. Just a misunderstanding about seating arrangements, Dad. Mr. Phillips, the manager, was now practically sweating through his dress shirt. He stepped forward with an anxious smile. Mr. Taylor, what an honor to have you dining with us tonight. If we'd known you were joining Miss Taylor, we would have prepared our finest table. This table seems perfectly fine to me, Robert said, glancing at the window view. My daughter has excellent taste. Catherine stood frozen, her mouth opening and closing without sound. Her two friends at the other table were suddenly very interested in their water glasses, refusing to make eye contact with anyone. Mr. Taylor, Catherine finally managed, her voice high and thin. I had no idea. That is, your daughter and I were just having a small disagreement about. I heard what you were saying as I walked in, Robert interrupted, his voice calm but with an edge of steel beneath it. Something about social order and belonging? I'd be interested to hear more about these concepts of yours. Thomas, still holding the plate of scallops, cleared his throat. Should I, serve the appetizer now? Yes, please do, Robert said kindly, taking off his suit jacket and hanging it on the back of the empty chair across from Jasmine. And I'll have whatever my daughter is having. We're celebrating tonight. Catherine's face had gone from pale to splotchy red. Mr. Taylor, I think there's been a terrible misunderstanding. I'm a huge admirer of your company. My husband's firm actually uses your software platforms for all our. Miss Sinclair, Robert cut in. I believe you were in the middle of recording something. He nodded toward her phone, still lying on the table with the camera app open. Don't let me interrupt you. Catherine grabbed her phone and quickly stopped the recording. I wasn't. I didn't mean, that is. Robert pulled out his chair and sat down across from Jasmine. If you'll excuse us, Miss Sinclair, my daughter was telling me about her promotion. She just landed Wilson & Brooks, their biggest client in company history. The Anderson account, wasn't it, sweetheart? Jasmine nodded, unable to hide her smile at the look of shock on Catherine's face. The Anderson account? Catherine repeated weakly. But that's a multi-million-dollar. $35 million to be exact, Robert said proudly. The youngest account executive in the company's history to land a client that size. I couldn't be prouder. Mr. Phillips stepped forward again. Mr. Taylor, Miss Taylor, please allow Lucille to offer your entire meal this evening on the house. It's our pleasure to serve such distinguished guests. That's not necessary, Robert said firmly. We're happy to pay full price, just like any other customers. He emphasized the last words while looking directly at Catherine. Catherine's phone began to ring in her hand. She glanced down at it, then back at Robert and Jasmine. I need to take this call. Excuse me. She turned and practically fled toward the restaurant entrance, her heels clicking rapidly on the floor. As Catherine disappeared, conversations around the restaurant slowly resumed. Thomas placed the scallops in front of Jasmine and promised to bring another plate for Robert right away. Robert leaned forward. So, he said with a warm smile, tell me all about how you landed the Anderson account. Don't leave out a single detail. Jasmine took a deep breath, feeling the tension of the last half hour finally leaving her body. As she began to tell her father about her big win, she noticed Catherine's two friends quietly paying their bill and slipping out of the restaurant without their dining companion. As Jasmine and her father enjoyed their meal, the restaurant settled back into its usual elegant hum of conversation and soft music. Several diners stole glances their way, some whispering behind menus about the scene they had witnessed. Others nodded respectfully when they caught Robert's eye. I'm sorry that happened, Robert said, cutting into his file at Meenan. It seems some people still can't see past their own narrow worldview. Jasmine sipped her water. It's nothing I haven't dealt with before, Dad. Just usually not so public. You handled it with grace, Robert said, his eyes filled with pride. More grace than she deserved. Thomas approached their table with a bottle of champagne and 2 fresh glasses. Compliments of the couple at table 12, he said, nodding toward an older pair who raised their glasses in a silent toast when Jasmine looked their way. They said they were impressed by your composure. That's very kind, Jasmine said with a smile. Please thank them for us. As Thomas poured the champagne, Mr. Phillips returned to their table, looking considerably more relaxed now that Catherine had left the building. Mr. Taylor, Miss Taylor, I want to personally apologize for what happened earlier. That kind of behavior is absolutely not what Lucille stands for. Robert nodded. I appreciate that, Mr. Phillips, though I think your apology would mean more to my daughter, as she was the one being harassed. The manager turned to Jasmine, genuine regret in his eyes. Miss Taylor, I'm truly sorry. I should have done more to stop it right away instead of trying to find a middle ground. There is no middle ground when it comes to treating our guests with respect. Thank you, Jasmine said. That means a lot. If there's anything we can do to make the rest of your evening more enjoyable, please don't hesitate to ask, Mr. Phillips added before excusing himself. Robert raised his champagne glass. To my brilliant daughter and her incredible achievement. The Anderson account. I still can't believe it. They clinked glasses, and Jasmine felt warmth spreading through her chest that had nothing to do with the champagne. Growing up, it had just been her and her dad against the world after her mom passed away. He had built his tech company from nothing, working late nights while still making time to help with her homework and attend every school event. You know, Robert said, leaning forward, when I started Taylor Innovations, I couldn't even get a meeting with companies half the size of Anderson. No one took me seriously. I know, Dad. You've told me the story about sleeping in your car for those first 6 months. 3 months, he corrected with a laugh. Let's not exaggerate my struggles. But the point is, what you've accomplished at your age is extraordinary. You did it on your own merit, not because of your last name. Jasmine nodded. I've never used the Taylor connection. Most people at work don't even know. Which makes your success even more impressive. Robert took another bite of his steak. So tell me more about how you convinced Anderson to sign. I heard their CEO is notoriously difficult to impress. As Jasmine described the weeks of preparation, the nerve-wracking presentation, and the moment she knew she'd won them over, her phone buzzed with a notification. She glanced down to see a social media alert. What is it? Robert asked, noting her expression. It seems Catherine has posted something online. Jasmine showed him her phone screen. There was a public apology post from Catherine Sinclair claiming a misunderstanding at Le Ciel restaurant and expressing her deepest regrets to the Taylor family. The comment section was already filling up, with many people asking what had happened and others speculating wildly. Robert raised an eyebrow. That was fast. She probably realized that video she was recording could hurt her more than help her, Jasmine said, putting her phone away. Social media can be ruthless. Are you going to respond? Robert asked. Jasmine shook her head. No need to give it more attention. Besides, she smiled, tonight is about celebrating, not dwelling on unpleasant encounters. As they finished their meal, a young black waitress who had been serving another table approached tentatively. I'm sorry to interrupt, she said softly, but I just wanted to say, thank you for standing your ground. It meant a lot to see that. Jasmine reached out and squeezed the young woman's hand. We all belong in every space we choose to be in. Never forget that. The waitress nodded, her eyes bright with emotion, before returning to her duties. 3 weeks later, Jasmine sat in her office at Wilson & Brooks, reviewing the final details of the Anderson contract. Her new corner office had a view of the city skyline that reminded her of that night at Le Ciel. She smiled, thinking about how much had changed since then. Her phone buzzed with a text from her best friend Tanya. Have you seen this month's Business Insider? Page 28. Curious, Jasmine reached for the magazine on her bookshelf. She flipped to page 28 and nearly dropped it when she saw the headline, Rising Star, How Jasmine Taylor is Changing the Face of Marketing. Below was a professional photo of her standing next to her father at Taylor Innovations headquarters. The article detailed her journey in the marketing world, her recent success with landing the Anderson account, and her philosophy about creating authentic connections between brands and consumers. It made no mention of the incident at Le Ciel, focusing instead on her professional achievements and vision for the future. As she was reading, her assistant knocked on her open door. Miss Taylor, your 2 o'clock is here. Thanks, Lai, sent them in. Jasmine stood up, smoothing her skirt and taking a deep breath. This was her first meeting with the full Anderson team since signing the contract, and she wanted to make a strong impression. She walked to the conference room, where 6 people were already seated around the table. Good afternoon, everyone, she said confidently. Thank you for coming to our first strategy session. As they went through introductions, the door opened and a late arrival slipped in apologetically. Sorry I'm late. Traffic was. The woman stopped mid-sentence when she saw Jasmine. It was Catherine Sinclair. Jasmine kept her professional smile in place, though her heart skipped a beat. And you are? Catherine Sinclair, she said quietly, her eyes fixed on the table. I'm the new VP of Communications at Anderson. I just started last week. The room felt suddenly tense, with the other Anderson executives glancing between the 2 women curiously. Welcome to the team, Ms. Sinclair, Jasmine said smoothly. Please have a seat. We were just getting started. As the meeting progressed, Jasmine presented her vision for Anderson's new marketing campaign with poise and enthusiasm. Catherine remained unusually quiet, speaking only when directly addressed. When the session ended 2 hours later, the Anderson CEO shook Jasmine's hand warmly. "This is exactly why we chose Wilson & Brooks. Your ideas are fresh, innovative, and exactly what our brand needs." As the room cleared out, Catherine lingered behind. When they were alone, she approached Jasmine cautiously. "Ms. Taylor," she began, her voice lacking its former arrogance, "I want to apologize for what happened at LaSalle. My behavior was inexcusable." Jasmine studied her face, looking for sincerity. "Why are you really apologizing, Ms. Sinclair? Because you're sorry, or because you now have to work with me?" Catherine flinched. "I deserve that. But the truth is, that night changed things for me. After your father left, the owner of LaSalle called me personally. He banned me from the restaurant and told me he'd heard about similar behavior at other establishments." She continued, "My husband was furious when the video started circulating in business circles. Our social invitations dried up overnight. It made me take a hard look at myself, and I didn't like what I saw." Jasmine remained silent, letting Catherine speak. "I've spent these weeks doing a lot of soul-searching and education," Catherine said. "I can't undo what I did, but I'm trying to be better. When I saw your name on the Wilson & Brooks contract last week, I almost resigned. But maybe this is where I need to be, learning to work with people I once wrongly judged." Jasmine picked up her portfolio. "I believe people can change, Ms. Sinclair. But it takes more than words. It takes consistent action over time." "I understand," Catherine nodded. "Then let's keep it professional," Jasmine said. "The campaign needs strong communication leadership. If you're as good at your job as your resume suggests, we'll work well together." As Catherine left, Jasmine's phone rang. It was her father. "How did the big meeting go?" he asked. Jasmine looked out her office window at the city below. "You won't believe who showed up," she said with a small laugh. "But you know what, Dad? I think it's going to be okay." "Of course it will," he replied. "You've never let anything stand in your way before. Why start now?" Jasmine smiled. Through the ups and downs, through the celebrations and confrontations, that was the truth she would always hold on to. No space was off limits, no table too exclusive, no dream too big for her to claim as her own.